Hey guys, what's up? I got everybody here from TMI. Don't forget to write us an email at tmipodcast2018. That's tmipodcast2018 at gmail.com. Let us know how we're doing. Also, check us out on Twitter.
Follow us on Twitter at TMI underscore podcast 2018. Just use the numbers, don't spell it out.
Ooh, don't forget facebook.com/TMI podcast 2018.
Follow us on the Apple Podcast app. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review.
All you YouTubers out there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, TMI Podcast 2018. Look for the popcorn bucket.
That's right. Also, check us out on Spotify and the Google Play Music app for all you Android users. Follow us and subscribe everywhere. We appreciate it. We're doing it for you guys, the fans. Thank you.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Dave Odinson Warhowski, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Welcome, everyone, to another
welcome
episode.
Back. Here we are.
Hello.
Hey, Mike's back.
Mike's back. Hello, Mike.
Well, welcoming me back. Thank you very much.
You out traveling the world?
Had to go to Boston.
Nice.
So here we are. I have to say I'm disappointed in our listeners. You know, we offered out a giveaway, our first ever giveaway, free from my personal collection, a Funko Pop never opened of Sidon Ithano, the Crimson Corsair.
Maybe no one likes that character.
The good thing
A
that
little more screen time.
The good thing that it's still plural listeners.
Listeners,
Plural,
yes.
yeah,
we do have more than one listener per week. So the giveaway was, and still is, we have 15 reviews currently on our iTunes store podcast page for TMI Confessionals. And we were trying to get to 20 reviews. We have 15 reviews currently. We were trying to get to 20. And the 20th reviewer would be the proud new owner of a Funko Pop Sidon Ithano Crimson Corsair figure. And we haven't had one budge from that 15 reviews.
It can be a good review, a bad review. It doesn't matter.
No. I guess it doesn't matter.
At this point, I would take anything.
No.
I just want to see 15 bump up to 16, 17.
You don't even have to review us. You just have to go to our location on iTunes and review something.
Yeah.
Use the Funko Pop.
Yeah, the only requirement is that you actually say something and leave your screen name, so we have some idea who you are, and we can.
You just open the floodgates.
Yeah, hopefully. I thought I opened them last week, but they were firmly shut. So, and this is just gonna, lead to, if this is successful, we give this guy away. It's just gonna lead to more giveaways. So you're benefiting, the listeners, because we love you.
Do.
You're stretching that love right now. You're making us question.
It's becoming a one-way relationship.
Yeah, but please, if you have a smartphone, you should have a little podcast button on there. Press that. Search TMI Confessionals. Boom, there we are.
There we
Get
are.
the reviews.
Popcorn bucket.
And, it's pretty much self-explanatory. Not that hard. So there you go. Okay.
Got that off your chest, Jim?
I do.
Okay, all right. I know that.
Sidon is waiting.
You've been stressing all week.
So let's start off with some news. Jeff, what do you got?
Oh, yeah. So everything old is new again is basically what every week we're coming down to. We will start with the big news that just came out of Las Vegas, Star Trek Las Vegas. Jean-Luc Picard is coming back after a 20-year absence from the TV and movie screens. Patrick Stewart is going to reprise his role as Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Enterprise. At this point, there's no real storyline established. It's been thrown out there that more than likely he's not going to be the same character necessarily that you saw 20 years ago. I'm thinking that at 78 years old, this guy's not flying around a starship. No.
So there's no indication that's an attempt to reunite the next generation.
Well, I think that if it does well, I'm sure, just like Star Trek Discovery, where you're one season in and already they're bringing in Captain April from the original Star Trek Enterprise. So you could very well start seeing some of these other side characters coming back in. Data.
But Jeff, what are you suggesting? That he's going to be sitting in his den reading a book?
I don't know. Maybe. It's just 45 minutes of Picard.
It'll be like Masterpiece Theater,
with his little lionfish behind him, and he's just rocking in his chair. I think that probably this character has experienced a lot over the years, and maybe he's a little jaded. Maybe he's a little disillusioned with the Starfleet franchise, so to speak, and somehow gets thrust back into the action. This is all pure speculation. They have to somehow get this guy, what's he going to do? Is he going to be on a starship or a spaceport somewhere and just, every week someone different comes by and visits him? I don't know.
Was there any indication that he's going to be a part of the already existing Star Trek show that's on the CBS?
No, this is a complete different entity, because that takes place prior to the original 1966 Star Trek TV show. So that's prior to Kirk and Spock and all that. Unless you start dealing with time travel, you bring in Q. Who knows? I will tell you this, that they will exist on the same streaming platform, which we're so thrilled with, that, if you want to watch this, you're going to have to pay for it. So who knows? Yeah. But that's the news coming out of Vegas. The other thing is that, again, like I said, everything old is new again. Supposedly, Elf, our little friend from Melmac, Alien Lifeform, is getting a reboot. If anybody's familiar, Elf, not Elf, the Will Ferrell Christmas movie, Elf, ALF.
This is dubious at best.
They are digging deep, man. And so do you go back? So the original, if anybody remembers from the 80s, this show was about this alien, and he was a cute little alien. He was a smart mouth. Crash lands on Earth. He's stuck here from the planet Melmac.
And he eats cats.
He lives with his family. Right. So he lives with this family, and every episode he's trying to eat the family cat. But he's a puppet. He's a hand puppet. He's like a Muppet.
But occasionally they did have him, you saw full body shots of somebody in a suit.
Yeah, somebody just running away, and you saw him full body. And he was like a little 3-4 foot little guy. And he was snarky. So I don't know. I mean, if they go CG, then no, I'm and I almost think you have to bring back the original voice, because it was so iconic. Hey, Willie, where's the cat? Like, you just had this kind of, that was interesting.
And speaking of like a kismet moment, that we just did Teen Titans Go to the movies last week. And one of the recent episodes of the Teen Titans Go TV show has a running joke about Alf. They never name.
Oh, really?
They never name him as Alf, but when Starfire first comes to the planet, Robin has to dissuade her from eating cats because her funny TV alien friend has told her that that's what cats are for. Oh, and then you hear a voiceover in Starfire's head of the Alf type voice.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So
I'll throw ties in. That is. I'll throw a little bit of trivia your way. What was Alf's original name? I mean, his real name. They called him Alf.
What the acronym stands for of Alf?
No, that's Alien Lifeform, but he actually had a physical name from the planet Melmac.
Oh, I have no idea.
Mike?
No clue.
It was Gordon Shumley.
Gordon Shumley.
That was his name?
That was his name, yes. So there you go. And the only other news coming out, I think we talked about this off air. It hasn't been confirmed. I looked online, but it was in the Hollywood Reporter, so I'm going to take it as confirmed that Danae Guerrera, who we know as Michonne from The Walking Dead, and Okoye, or is it Okoye from Black Panther? Okoye, has signed on to Legendary's Godzilla vs. Kong. So this Godzilla, King of All Monsters, not even released yet, and it looks like they're moving forward with this next movie in the franchise.
Which spells good news for the Godzilla King of the Monsters. They must be very confident in this enough to greenlight Kong already.
Yeah, you would think. So that means that we'll see some little breadcrumbs of Kong. As we spoke last week, that Kong probably won't show up per se in this movie, but I'm sure that it'll end on a little cliffhanger or, enough little tidbits to make us believe that.
And the big question when they first really hinted at tying these two things together, and this was before even Kong Skull Island was out, that this was what they were moving towards. But then the thought was, well, how can Godzilla fight Kong, as Godzilla in this universe would be so much bigger?
Right.
But then when you saw Kong Skull Island, they really jacked Kong up quite a bit.
He's upscaled. And I really like that movie. I mean, I wasn't too, the little bad guy skull diggers or whatever they wanted to call them were kind of okay, cool. But I like that movie, so we'll see. Yeah,
that was a decent effort, I think. So yes, and hopefully, that's just not the end of whatever they're trying to build here. Hopefully, it carries on into a series of both Kong and Godzilla films.
They go into space and they have adventure movies together.
Yeah, well, Godzilla went into space in the Toho series.
That's right.
So I wanted them to bring back the Smog Monster too. So
the Smog Monster, that might have been the low point.
The high point. The high point, please.
There was some trippy psychedelic crap going on in that movie.
I'm going to make us watch that.
I think they were that's fine. I'll watch it again. I'll make more fun of it. So that's it. That's all I have for the news.
So that brings us to our, the main topic of today's episode, which is Season 1 of Cloak and Dagger, the Freeform series, which just ended as we record this less than a week ago. The finale of the Season 1 aired on Freeform. So now we're prepared to talk about the whole darn thing.
So spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, yes. Yeah, this is kind of the downfall of doing a podcast that tries to be timely. A lot of people haven't been able to see the stuff that we're talking about. So you may be listening to this 6 months after we've recorded.
Right.
So
before season 2 launches.
The news that we just gave you is probably old hat by the time you're listening.
Yeah. We're like a newspaper at this point.
Yeah, I know.
By the time you read it.
But if you're listening 6 months after we record, welcome. Thanks for coming.
You're right. Too bad you weren't the 20th.
Merry Christmas. Yeah.
Hopefully the contest isn't still running at that point.
Yeah, I know. Poor Sidon. He's getting an inferiority complex. Okay, so Cloak and Dagger. These are beloved characters from the Marvel Comics, and they debuted right when I was at the height of my comic collecting in 1982. I was probably 11 years old. And they first appeared in Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's correct.
And kind of like the Punisher in my mind, Venom definitely in my mind, Cloak and Dagger is kind of synonymous with Spider-Man to me, just because they were often guest stars in his titles. And they were a very streetwise kind of combo where they didn't really fight supervillains, at least not in the beginning. They were more taking out street criminals, drug dealers, that type of thing, because their history is that they're runaways, both of them. And they are, I think, injected by some kind of mob-type underworld figures, and that's how they gain their powers. And Cloak, of course, his power is to kind of suck people into this netherworld that he's connected to.
And he can transport.
And you can transport, very much like Nightcrawler with
It's the Dark Force dimension.
The Dark Force dimension. And it always reminded me of like when Ghost Rider would zap people with his hellfire and like kind of burn their soul rather than their physical. So it would leave them kind of almost catatonic. That's kind of, I think, what happens to people that get zapped by or get drawn into the dark.
I remember people falling out of his cape and they're always like foaming at the mouth.
Right.
Conversely,
Dagger, who is the lightness of this duo, her daggers of light, I think, kind of serve a similar purpose, where they're not meant to kill. They're not like physical knives. They're just kind of stunning her foes, if I'm remembering that correctly. Cloak and Dagger first debuted in Spider-Man, so they were always very tied to the rest of the Marvel Universe, and very cool looking characters as well. And you can tell that Dagger was completely designed by a man, one of the most scantily clad of the female Marvel characters.
The skin tight white
with leotard. A cutout dagger, going just over her chest and then down to her navel is the blade part of the dagger.
It lifts and supports. Not so much.
So this is the TV version of the duo. Very different. The powers are the same, almost, kind of a little bit different. But
well, I think right, and as the series goes on, you start to see a little bit more of them controlling this ability, and you do see it kind of mirroring more of the comic book attributes.
So we have Tandy as Dagger and Tyrone as Cloak. And same names as from the comic. And in the comic, they were always supposed to be runaways, teenagers, and as they are in the TV show. But in the comic, I never got the impression that I was reading about kids, even though that's what the characters were supposed to be. Because Cloak always was this mysterious, Doctor Strangey type character.
Yeah, definitely.
But always, whenever you would see his speech bubbles, they would always be like in bold face, and so like you.
He always had like this dark voice.
Yes, exactly, like Christian Bale's Batman.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So yes, just because of that, I never thought of him as a kid. But in this show, I think they're really represented accurately.
Yeah, no, I think these two actors are phenomenal. I love. So we got Olivia Holt, who plays Tandy, and Aubrey Joseph is Tyrone. And I looked at neither one of them have really much of a resume as far as past work. I think that they hold such gravitas to these characters, and they're very riveting individually and together. So I'm very impressed with the casting on this.
And the origin story has been tweaked somewhat. It all ties to the Roxxon Corporation.
Right.
And there's a night where Tyrone's older brother tries to dissuade him from stealing a radio out of a car, and that leads to Tyrone's older brother being shot at the same time that a Roxxon Corporation oil rig type thing in the bay explodes, and this gives Tandy and Tyrone their powers.
Right. She's in the back seat of the car with her dad, and when this thing goes off, he ends up crashing the car, and she's submerged, and all of a sudden she's saved by Tyrone. And I like the fact that as the show goes on, they keep going back and revisit. So they were young. So it does cut a couple years later where they're like teenagers, but that was when they were like 9 and 10. So they do cut back, and every now and again, as these two characters are starting to realize that they keep getting drawn together, because they do come from two completely different backgrounds. And I liked Tyrone's storyline. I think in the comic books, I think it was reversed though. I remember him being kind of like the street kid on drugs, and it really, I don't know, maybe I'm just misremembering it, but
no, I think you're right. I don't remember it 100% to a T, the comic either, but I think that they did have a reversal somewhat, where it was Tyrone that was the street kid,
right? Which is obviously the standard stereotype, and in this one he's more the affluent kid dealing with the fact that his older brother was killed, and feels this kind of legacy to live up to his brother's memory, and while Tandy is more this kind of street rat punk. She's got a crappy mother. And there's a fair amount of violence. There's a fair amount of drug use. There's some language in this. So, I think, Freeform is really freeform.
Yeah, they are pushing it. They are pushing the envelope here with this. And Tandy would be probably affluent if it wasn't for the death of her father, because after the death of her father, who works for Roxxon,
right,
this was tied to this explosion. So that same night where Tandy loses her father and Tyrone loses his brother, it both sets them on a lifetime of vengeance. Tyrone wants to go after the cop that killed his brother, who mysteriously disappears. I think the Force kind of, the Force not meaning the Star Wars.
Luke Skywalker stuff.
The police force kind of, shields him and hides him, because he's given, a very physical attribute, a scar down his face, and and bright red hair. He might as well be, Ronald McDonald. Like,
right. He came right out of the Dick Tracy comic book of bad guys. I call him Scar Redface.
So Tyrone is looking for this cop, whose name is Connors, and Tandy is looking to get some retribution from the Roxxon Corporation, because she feels that they did not heed her father's warnings that there was danger, and when the rig blew up, it could have been prevented. So that's pretty much the setup in episode 1.
And it was a great setup. Episode 1 I thought was phenomenal.
And the opening was very beautiful. The car goes off the bridge. Tyrone has dived into the water to go after his brother, who has just been shot by Connors. and somehow Tyrone saves Tandy out of the car. Now, this was a little bit kind of vague because you see Tyrone's hand and all the Dark Force coming out of
immediately, right.
and seemingly going through the roof of the car or the windshield to grab her and pull her out. And they don't really get into that much farther on into the episode, but you must think it's something to do with his teleportation powers, that he grabs her out and is able to get her out of the car.
But we see in later episodes, though, that he can't teleport unless he has something cloaking him.
Yeah, and at the time he did have that hoodie.
The hood,
that he was wearing. Yeah. And I love that, speaking of that they did attempt to have a cloak for Tyrone that looked like the cloak from the comics.
Well, let's jump. I mean, if you jump to the last episode, he's on the run from the cops, and it's Mardi Gras, and he goes in and he finds this cloak, and it is dead on exactly what it looks like in the comic books. It is this bejeweled black and blue striped cowl. And I just lost my shit. You can believe that. But that's exactly the way he looks in the comic. And I'm like, that's it.
Yeah.
And then take it from him and arrest him.
And especially, the CG work that they do with all the black, the smoke looking blackness coming out of that cloak. Yeah,
which is very Nightcrawler-y. It's got almost like tendrils of its own, this smoky monster from Lost kind of a feel to it. There's a couple hit or miss episodes in between, but it does propel everything forward. It's a slow burn.
It definitely is. Yeah. The first 2 or 3 episodes, you're thinking, okay, this has got to pick up because nothing really happens. But it's one of these things where you kind of feel they're saving their budget for the last couple of episodes because it really is a blowout in the last episodes 9 and 10. So if you watch through this whole thing, just hang in there because you will be satisfied at the end.
Yeah, the pacing is really a problem for me. I mean, it was really, Jim, only your words of encouragement that kept me going.
keep going.
I was like, I'm on 4 and I don't know if I can keep going.
Yeah, that's the problem with these shows. Even we talk about Lost a lot, and there was so many throwaway episodes. But we only had 10 episodes to get through the entire season. Back in the day, it was 23
episodes. Yeah,
24 episodes. So there's a lot of filler, and most of that stuff doesn't really propel the narrative forward. This had an end game for the end of season 1.
But I think they, just like the Netflix shows, they could have easily probably cut this into a 6 episode
probably
and not lost much at all.
Right.
And it wasn't really that hard of a watch. There are 42 minutes on demand. So, it wasn't a huge investment of time, but even at 42 minutes, you're still thinking, why are there pacing problems here? Why is this slow?
That's a lot of teen angst stuff going on too, that maybe isn't necessarily aimed at us.
Right. Yeah, that was what the comic was missing. That's what I was talking about before, because you never really got a sense that the comic characters were kids, but you definitely do in this. Probably, and I would say it's a good home on Freeform, which was formerly ABC Family. So this is, a Disney kind of a channel without actually being a Disney channel. I think they realize that a lot of young adults watch the channel. So this is probably geared towards not quite tweens, but maybe, the 16, 17, 18-year-old bracket. Just enough edge to keep them hooked.
The last episode had just less than 500,000 viewers.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah. It started with about 1 million, about 900,000, and then the last episode was about half that.
But again, you're going to see an uptick of people who are going to sit down and probably binge this thing.
Yeah.
Or skip through it and just watch the last episode. And they did toy with you got little teases of, the much larger Marvel world. Wasn't there a shout out to Tony Stark at one point?
There was, yeah.
Right? And Danny Rand, who's Iron Man.
Rand and Stark.
Iron Fist. Sorry.
And Misty Knight.
Yeah, and Misty from Luke Cage, yeah.
Yeah, so you do have those tendrils of reaching out to the Netflix world as well as the cinematic MCU. Whether or not they all get together, who knows? I do know that I think that they ran Runaways. Are they bringing Runaways over here into Freeform?
Yeah, it ran directly after, and actually that was very good. Episode 1 of Runaways was excellent.
Now that's a newer comic series that I'm not all that familiar with, but I know that it's pretty popular. So if they somehow combine these two worlds, that's pretty interesting.
What was that originally on? Was that on Hulu first, when they first ran season 1?
Yeah, it's on Hulu. Correct.
Okay, and now that you're saying that they've moved it to Freeform?
They've at least released episode 1 on Freeform.
Okay, I've got to catch up then. Maybe we can do a Runaways episode fairly soon.
Runaway.
I would highly recommend it.
Okay, so and this show, and going back to Cloak and Dagger, we've got a lot of nice secondary characters here. The Detective O'Reilly,
O'Reilly,
who is, as we know as comic fans, later turns into Mayhem and actually does.
Well, I was going to say,
end of episode 10.
Nice little, you finally get your little end credit teaser.
So we've got O'Reilly, Bridget O'Reilly, who's a strong female character. We've got Connors, who is a reprehensible villain here, who gets sucked into Tyrone's cloak during episode 10. So, but he doesn't, he's not dead, so he could come back, maybe as another zombie. So, and it turned into a zombie type of a show.
Yeah, what do they call them? Terrors or whatever?
Terrors.
Yes. Right. Because part of the explosion that gives Cloak and Dagger their powers, anybody that's exposed to it, I don't know, for longer or less than what Cloak and Dagger were exposed, somehow turn into mindless killers, kind of in the vein of 28 Days Later, kind of Infected, where they just go nuts. And so this happens, apparently, on that rig that explodes in the first episode. You don't see this in the first episode. You see it a little bit later in the series of what's going on the rig. And then when the energy is released into Nolans, as they call it, Nolans, at the end, then it's almost, a good chunk of the populace becomes these terrors. And so this gives the excuse to give Cloak and Dagger just free reign on kicking ass when they're being attacked by these zombies. But here's the thing: is that Dagger kills a lot of these people with her daggers.
Yeah.
Like apparently though, once they combine their powers at the end and they suck all this bad energy out of the city, everything goes back to normal. But I assume those people are still dead. So she has killed a number of people. So they don't really touch on that. I don't think they're
maybe they will in season 2.
Yeah, but I think that's okay, because you wouldn't have gotten to the point where they could suck all the energy and release it into the sky unless they killed those people, right?
Yeah, this is true.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, there you go.
And she does it really cool too. When she generates the dagger, she just kind of, flings them like ninja stars almost.
Yeah, she goes pretty adept at those pretty quick.
Yeah, by the end, she was getting very good. And they also have, not only can they, can Cloak suck people in, and then Dagger can kill them with her shards of light. But if they touch skin on skin to different people, Cloak can see their fears and Dagger can see their hope. And for some reason,
I get it.
They always go, whenever these sequences are happening, it's always either in a garden or in a forest. It doesn't matter what the fears are. You're always in a forest, This may be a budgetary concern. Who knows?
Well, it is. They are shooting in New Orleans, so I guess there's a fair amount of gardens down there. But cemeteries as well. So,
because even the one where she touches one of the rich kids who just, his hopes is to have, as much sex as he possibly can. Right, yeah. It's in a garden, so it's in a garden. The bed is in a garden. So, and then we have Connors. I just mentioned we have Mina, who is the daughter of another Roxxon employee who is a friend of Tandy's father. So she becomes a terror in the last episode, but we assume that she is cured at the end. But we don't know. We haven't seen her. O'Reilly is not cured because now she's Mayhem. So maybe Mina has become some kind of a villainess as well.
Tandy's mom stepped up at the end there.
Yes, she did. Yes. The drug-addled mother has said no to drugs in the last episode.
Yeah.
Tandy herself asked her if she needed a little pick-me-up in her coffee.
Mom, I know what you need. I know you.
She's the enabler.
There you go.
Yes. That was a little shocking to me. And let me just say this. This was bugging me throughout the whole thing. She is homeless living in a church, but obviously a very high-maintenance kind of a girl. So without running water, I'm just wondering how she maintains herself in that environment. It looks like maybe she sneaks home to her mom's house during the day when nobody.
Yeah, actually,
so maybe that's where she showers
and
has
her going back home at one point. So.
Okay, so that was a little bothersome to me. It's like, this girl is too high maintenance to be on the street. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was not faithful to the comic, but I think that's in its benefit. I think it's a more real show than it would have been if it was trying to be more faithful to the comic, and I think it's very enjoyable.
Yes, I agree.
I agree as well. And just a bit of Olivia Holt trivia here. She actually sang a song on the show.
Really?
So, yes, it was the episode where Come Sail Away was in the background.
Oh.
That was her.
That's her singing?
That is her singing.
Wow. And I'd like to give a shout out to, we didn't talk about the character of Evita, who is Tyrone's love interest. And the only reason I bring her up is because of her voodoo aunt, who's just named Auntie in the show. And so basically what you see her doing is taking swigs of something and spitting it out. And I don't know if this is for voodoo or if that's just the way she drinks.
No. She's got a drinking problem then, if that's the way she drinks. She's not doing it properly.
Well, she's in recovery, so she's right. She just wants to taste and then spits it out.
Exactly. Or if she just, nobody ever gives her anything that she enjoys. So she immediately spits it out. Yeah. So we've got her. Is there anything else we want to bring up with Cloak and Dagger? It seems like we're wrapping this up fairly quickly.
I think we covered it. I mean, again, because it's such a slow burn for so many episodes, it's it takes a lot to get to where they got.
Oh, the other thing, I would like to bring this up, actually. So this is my saved ground for Cloak and Dagger. Tyrone's voice, I think, is so incredibly soothing. Now, I can fall asleep watching anything, but whenever he would talk at length, I would just start to drift off. So Aubrey Joseph, is the name of the actor who plays Tyrone. And I was convinced because there's some interesting cadences to his voice as well. So I was convinced he was British. So I went online to do some research to see if my theory was correct, and he is not. It's just the way he speaks. But I would like to see maybe him doing some voiceovers for GPS or for Google, because he's got a very easygoing, soft kind of a voice. Make this left turn here. You don't know what I've been going through. You don't know me. All those scenes he had with the priest. That's what comes to me.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, if you guys get a chance out there, if you're fans of the Cloak and Dagger show, please go on YouTube, because there's a few Disney Channel, and Disney Channel has a few interviews on YouTube with the two stars, Tandy and Tyrone of Cloak and Dagger, Olivia and Aubrey. And they're very cute little, kind of like a newlyweds game where how well do you know your co-star, where they have to guess each other's favorite Marvel characters.
Oh, that's funny.
Draw each other's kind of profile. It's kind of like a charades thing set up.
I think they stole our confessional. I will say, though, that in the opening credits, that Bill Mantlo, who originally created these characters for the comics, is associated as either an executive producer but he's associated with this, so he does have a hand in creating this. I thought that was, because I don't remember the original Spider-Man episode or issue, but they did have a 4-issue miniseries that was illustrated by Rick Leonardi, and that artwork was just, I love this guy's artwork, and he's been associated with these characters for a while, on and off. They've had a couple different reboots over the years, but those two guys, Bill Mantlo and Rick Leonardi, have a lot to say in what this show looks like.
Good. And I'm glad, and hopefully they're making some money off these characters, because Mike, after you let me borrow that History of Marvel book, it seems like nobody made anything back in those days.
No.
Characters or just the great job that they did illustrating and writing these comics. So,
well, that's, we can get into the history of Image, and that's why Image Comics exists.
Right. With the mighty Todd McFarlane
and Liefeld. Yeah.
So how many popcorn buckets are we thinking for Cloak and Dagger?
It's tough to
3.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
look at it for the whole series.
Right. If you look at the first episode and you look at the last episode, I would give it a solid 3.5. In betweens, I would say 3.
Yeah, last episode I might even go 4 popcorn buckets. Just taking that last episode by itself. But yeah, if you're looking at the whole series, you got to think, okay, it's a slow burn. So I would say 3.5 popcorn buckets for me.
Okay.
But fair definitely enough. A 4 on the last episode.
Yeah.
And a 4 on the first one.
I agree. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. And it's another one of those things where really the potential of it is so great that I cannot wait to see season 2. So hopefully they do not squander that opportunity. So there we go. So you know what? This gave us a perfect opportunity for our... I couldn't see a better time when we would ever want to do this movie, and I'm smelling popcorn.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. We promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go.
I couldn't see a time when we ever wanted to do this movie, but somehow you shoehorned it in.
I wanted to go obscure with this one. I could not think of a more perfect film to pair the Cloak and Dagger TV show with
Then Cloak and Dagger.
Cloak and Dagger, the 1984 classic is not a word for it. I'll just say the 1984.
It is something.
It definitely is not.
No.
Starring Dabney Coleman of 9 to 5 fame. And he was in War Games, wasn't he?
He was in War Games. He was in Tootsie as well. And
Tootsie,
he had his own TV show before this. Do you remember Buffalo Bill?
Yes.
And he always kind of plays the same character.
I loved Buffalo Bill.
I do remember it being very funny. Because he was just like a sardonic or sarcastic jerk.
Yeah, he was.
I think it
kind of like they took his 9 to 5 character and kind of built the TV show.
Right. Yeah, I think he's made a career of just kind of playing Dabney Coleman. Although in this one, he plays 2 characters, actually. We'll get into that.
So what we're talking about is Cloak and Dagger from 1984, which kind of rode the crest of video game popularity. Kind of the final years that Atari kind of really held mastery of the whole video game landscape, because then you started getting ColecoVision, you started getting Intellivision, you started getting Nintendo kind of sneaking in on it.
Yeah.
But Cloak and Dagger was, and even back then I was kind of disappointed when I heard the movie was coming out called Cloak and Dagger that it wasn't based on the comic Cloak and Dagger, which had been in existence for 2 years. But what it is, it's Henry Thomas of E.T. fame playing a little kid who's got imagination issues. He's an imaginary friend called what is his name?
Jack Flack. Jack Flack,
who is kind of like a James Bond, kind of a
he was like an army general. I wouldn't even go spy. I guess he was an espionage-ish.
A secret agent, maybe.
Yeah, secret agent.
Yeah, secret agent. I'll give you that. Although I will tell you. So we brought up Dabney Coleman first, but if you look at the opening credits, Henry Thomas, who had one movie to his credit, which was E.T., got top billing over Dabney Coleman on this movie.
Well, E.T. at that time was probably the biggest moneymaker ever.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure, right? Yeah.
Yeah, let the kid ride the crest.
Yeah, so what it is Henry Thomas plays the kid who sees his imaginary friend Jack Flack, and it's part of what I think the Jack Flack character is part of a kind of a Dungeons and Dragons type spy game that he plays with his little friend.
Yeah, he's got a little figurine, like a little pewter figurine that he carries around with him.
Jack Flack, yeah.
And Jack Flack kind of gives him this bad advice, to be honest with you. He gives this kid he sends him into danger at every friggin' turn. He pushes this kid. There's no common sense approach whatsoever. He's like, come on, go in there. That guy's got a gun. You can get him.
Yeah. Grab the gun.
Yeah, don't worry about me. He can't shoot me. I'm not really here.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know if I even saw this movie back in the 80s. I had no memory of it going into it. I only knew that the title would be perfect with our Cloak and Dagger episode.
Right.
That's the only connection, because, I thought, how did I miss this Cloak and Dagger movie from 1984? This will be really interesting. And then I turned it on and I'm like, damn it, Jim.
Like the first 5 minutes before I realized that Jack Flack was imaginary, I thought this was the worst piece of crap that I would have gotten into.
It's funny because I just watched True Lies last night, and it's the same opening almost. He's a super spy sneaking into, and they're speaking Russian, and you don't get the translations. So you're like, all right, man, they're just going with this stuff. Yeah, and then you find out it's all like a role play game.
And then Jack Flack, he enters the scene with a red, white, and blue American flag parachute. Just like James Bond at the beginning of The Spy Who Loved Me with the Union Jack, right? Yeah. Then he hits the button and it sucks up into his members-only jacket.
Which is you're like, all right, that's cool. He's like, I say the same thing. I know I've seen this movie, but I don't remember any of it. All I remember is that iconic cover of the two of them.
Of the movie poster, right? With the crosshairs. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I don't remember this being what it is at all. This was crazy. This is a movie that just would never exist in today's society.
So the basic plot setup is that Henry Thomas has his only friend is apparently a girl that's maybe 2 years younger than him. They're not even related. They're just neighbors.
I thought it was his sister to begin with, but I will say
they're in different houses. They live in different houses.
Yeah, well, but I hate to say she was such a bad actress.
She was.
And I hate saying that because she's a kid and kids every line out of this kid's mouth was just
but while I was watching it, I knew that I had seen her somewhere before. It was bugging me throughout the whole thing. I tried to get it from memory and I couldn't, so I Googled her. She's from Twilight Zone, the movie. She's in the John Lithgow episode.
Yes.
The annoying kid that's in front of John Lithgow that is taking pictures with her Polaroid camera as he's going nuts seeing something on the wing of the plane. So that's where you know her from. Huh. Her name is Christina Nigra. That's her name.
And I apologize. I do not mean to call you a bad actress.
So the plot is that this Kim and what is his name in the movie? Henry Thomas. Davey.
Oh, Davey.
So they're big video game fans, of course. They're big, and his favorite video game is Cloak and Dagger, which has, I think, the Jack Black character in it in the video game. So they're friends with like a comic book guy, kind of video game guy who I don't know where he was.
Morris.
Like, was he in a store? Was he working on video games? I don't know.
He was working in his basement.
No, it was in a store. He was the owner of the store. I took it.
Oh, he was.
Morris.
Okay, so he really was like comic book guy then from The Simpsons.
Right.
And I recognized him, Morris. He's one of the characters from Dick Tracy.
Yes, he was Flat Top.
He was Flat Top, yeah.
Flat Top.
That's the only thing I know him from is Dick Tracy.
Yeah, I looked him up. He's been in a couple of different movies, but that would probably be the only thing.
So this guy, Morris, sends the two kids on an errand to get him Twinkies. And somehow they end up, they're on the top floor of this building where the video game makers are that make the Cloak and Dagger video game. And as they're going up the stairs, because Henry Thomas tells Kim to go up the elevator, but I'm going to go up the stairs because that's what spies do. We take two different routes up to the top of the building. Somebody comes out with a lab coat on and a video cartridge of Cloak and Dagger saying, take this, guard it with your life. There's something about this, while other guys follow him out onto the stairway and shoot him dead right in front of Henry Thomas. So this leads the odyssey of the movie. Henry Thomas now has this video game cartridge that has some kind of government secrets on it. And he's got to get away from the bad guys and get somebody to believe him, because he's pretty much the boy who cried wolf, because everybody knows he has an imaginary friend, to believe him that there are people after him and that he's got these important government plans on this copy of the Cloak and Dagger video game.
Right. So go back to that when they're infiltrating, quote unquote, they're role-playing, infiltrating the lobby of this building, and he's sneaking through, and he's got a plastic gun, and the security guard is sitting there, and he's watching this kid, sneak down behind the poles, and he's got the little plastic gun, and I'm just like, this kid would be shot dead now.
Yeah.
There's no way. It was intolerable. It was just.
And when he gets into the stairwell, and the guy, bursts out with his lab coat. Do they wear lab coats when they make video games? I think
they do.
Yeah.
They must. It was a Cloak and Dagger video game, so it's a secret.
So when he gives him the video game, and then he gets shot immediately after handing the game over to Henry Thomas, he falls down, 10 stories.
Right through the stairwell.
Yeah, and you see the camera follows him down, and you see him hit the bottom. Henry Thomas runs down to the lobby level and sees the dead body there and runs out and says, help me. Within 2 minutes, not even 2 minutes, he gets the security guard to go in the stairway. The body's cleaned up. There's no blood. There's no sign of him.
Which makes you think that this is all in the kid's head.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, that parents not believing the kid's theme just carries throughout this whole thing. No, I'm telling you. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, and what we also find out, which is Jack Flack is basically based on his father.
Also played by Dabney Coleman.
Right, correct. So the kid has no mom. The mom has passed away. And so obviously this kid is now immersed himself in this video game world because he's dealing with the death of his mother. But Jack Flack looks and talks like his father. So he does have some kind of reverence for his dad, that his dad is a superhero. But he's really not. I'm trying to remember what it was that he actually did.
He was like
Air Force.
Air Force.
That's right. He was
building airplanes or something, yep. But it wasn't actually a pilot. So if you remember at the end, he knew how to taxi a plane, but he did not know how to fly a plane.
That's right. And the kid did have the coolest space shuttle wallpaper, so that was really neat.
Yes, and if you noticed, when they were in Morris's office, you saw a poster of the E.T. Atari video game.
Oh, no, I missed that. Oh, no, I missed it. That's a nice little
that was right in the beginning when Morris was telling them to go buy him.
Okay, I did see there was like pole position. There was a couple other throwaway posters in the background.
But they didn't. It was very subtle because it was out of focus. But I froze it, and then I saw it was E.T. So there you go. Shout out to E.T. And I really thought that that Morris, he would be a nice. He would fit in nicely on this show. I think if we had somebody.
Morris, he's got nothing else going on, so he might as well.
Yeah, no.
That was pretty hardcore because they ended up shooting Morris and sticking him in the trunk.
They did, and they were right through the head.
The kid is in the trunk with him.
They stuck him in with a dead body. This kind of thing would never fly in kids' movies today. First of all, you had that Morris scene where he was shot in the head, where then you have the Jack Flack character egging Davey on to shoot and kill the bad guy. Just kill him. You got to kill him. And then, the kneecaps thing.
You got kids shooting at adults shooting at kids.
Yeah, and we're like towards the end when the last bad guy is standing and Davy has the gun and the bad guy has like a machine gun saying, I'm going to kill you slowly. First, I'm going to shoot you in the kneecaps. Then I'm going to shoot you in the stomach. You're going to wish you were dead. I'm going to watch you die.
And there was a lot like Jolly Blaster him or something.
Right. And the other classic moment, I think, is when Davy breaks out of the trunk when he pushes the back seat open so he can get out of the trunk of the bad guy.
Which I don't think I think all cars are like that now, but I don't know if they were back in the day, but
yeah, you can, because I had to put car seat covers on mine and I pulled it down just exactly like that. So Davy gets out of the back seat or out of the trunk like that and starts to drive the bad guy's car away, and he's hitting other cars in the parking garage, but still the bad guy says, what are you, crazy? Don't shoot at my car.
Right. Kill the kid, but keep the car.
Yeah. And the other classic line I think that maybe should have lived on but never has is that Dabney Coleman as Jack Flack tells Davy at some point, this guy's a jerk, kill him.
That should be a meme.
As if that's the only reason to kill him.
Right, correct.
Jerk, kill him.
This kid's in therapy right now. He's got the voices in his head. He tell me to kill people.
So at the end, Jack Flack sacrifices himself, it seems, so that Davy will have a better relationship with his father.
He goes all Jedi Ghost on this.
Yeah, he does. He goes Jedi Ghost. You know, you see the bullet holes start to bleed before he actually dies. So he did actually take some bullets, like in the imaginary world at least.
Right.
But it was a touching kind of an ending because you see Dabney Coleman's character after the bad guys, the last elderly couple that tries to hijack the airplane with Davy in it.
Right. So that's another. So this all takes place in San Antonio, which is kind of cool because they use the riverfront and whatever, and you're like, so San Antonio riverfront. But yeah, the two bad guys turn out to be this old couple who we thought were like friendly, and I think what was it that she had the bad guy had 3 fingers, and at one point she pulls the gloves off and she's a 3-fingered creep.
So they take Davy hostage at the end, and they take him on this plane because they want to get to Cuba because they realize the jig is up, that they've been had, the police are onto them. So they grab Davy, they get on a plane. So as they're trying to get a pilot to come out from the airport saying that we've got this kid, we're going to kill him unless you give us a pilot to fly us to Cuba.
So who comes out?
Yep, Davy's dad shows up. He says, I can only taxi this plane, but I'm going to fake it. I'm going to go in there. It turns out that Davy's dad gets him in the cockpit with him. He pushes him out the window of the plane as he's taxiing the plane. And then the plane rolls down the runway and explodes.
Because
that's what happens to planes, right?
In the 80s movies.
So, and then out of the inferno, you see a shadowy figure walking. First, you think it's Jack Flack because you see the beret, you see the jacket, and then it morphs into Davy's father.
There you go. And so it's like, my dad is the hero. I want him to be all
along. Yep. He turns into the hero at the end. So it was very touchy. And actually, I read something on Wikipedia, on Dabney Coleman's Wikipedia page, how he was saying how every once in a while, 2 or 3 times a year, somebody will stop him about Cloak and Dagger and tell him that it brought him closer to his father.
So up until this point, I only had an imaginary friend.
I guess you would call him Mr. Coleman, but even his friends must feel uncomfortable calling him Dabney. You know, how do you address someone as Dabney? Yeah. Dab?
Dab.
Yeah.
Dab.
Dabby?
Yeah.
Like Dabby?
Well, I've got this in my notes, and I don't really know what it means. I just wrote, kid misses bus, buys hooker.
Huh?
Yes. Because the bus driver wouldn't let him on because at the end when everybody's converging on the airport, right? So he's trying to get to the airport. The bus driver won't let him on, and then he kicks him off. And then all of a sudden he's in like the red light district. And you see Louis Anderson as like in a cameo as a cab driver.
No, yes. I don't remember that.
Yeah. And then Louis Anderson tells him to get lost because he has no money. Then some other kindly cab driver gives him a lift to the airport. But I don't remember the hooker. Is that
I don't know. Maybe just because he was in the red light district. So it's like,
okay.
I don't have exact change for the bus, so I might as well buy a hooker. It could have easily gone that way.
So I couldn't find any budget information on
that. There probably was no, but they spent all their budget on those giant walkie-talkies.
But the interesting thing about this is that it was released twice in 1984. It had 2 release dates.
What?
First in June on a double bill with The Last Starfighter, which they probably kind of tied them together as video game movies, right?
Yep.
So maybe that was for drive-ins, I don't know. And then it was released on its own in theaters on August 4th or 3rd, early August. So right around where we are now as we're recording this, actually. So even with 2 release dates, It managed to only make $9.7 million.
Ouch.
So I don't know, if it made money because I couldn't find any budget information, but it did say that if you adjust for inflation, this would mean that it would have made $25 million today, which is not much, today. So I can't say that this was a hit of any magnitude. Definitely wasn't with me because I had no desire to see it when I was 13 years old.
No, I'm sure I didn't see it at the time.
This is my first viewing.
And your last.
And my last.
Yeah.
The most memorable thing about it will continue to be for me the poster of the crosshair.
Yeah, no, right.
Was there a game called Cloak and Dagger in reality?
I don't remember. I mean, they did create that old school 32, the 32-bit graphic Atari look and feel to it, but I don't. If the movie did bad, I can't imagine they would
bother. Yeah,
after the fact.
Yeah, because that's usually what they did. The video games back in those days wouldn't come out until maybe a year after.
And that's funny you mentioned E.T. because the video game for E.T. is so notoriously bad that there's a whole documentary about how Atari took all these old unsold cartridges and buried them in a landfill, and it's been like an urban legend for years, and then somebody finally went and dug them up, and sure enough, they found them.
They found them.
Thousands of dollars on eBay now. These throwaway.
I mean, I wonder if they were boxed or they didn't even.
Yeah, so it was a mix because obviously over time the boxes would deteriorate underground. I mean, that was 82, so even if you by 83, 84, these video games are like we need to. But yeah, it became like this big urban legend that they took this video game because it was so notoriously horrible and impossible to play. That they rounded them all up and buried them.
Yeah, I think I did have the ET game, and I maybe played it once or twice.
Did you?
It just stayed on the shelf after that.
Well, it's funny because so do you remember the 25th anniversary release of ET on disc? And they went out of their way to replace the shotguns with walkie-talkies because for whatever reason, it was a studio. I don't think it was Spielberg. Somebody had a knee-jerk reaction that, in this day and age, these cops wouldn't be running around chasing these kids on bikes with shotguns. So they replaced it. And of course there was an outcry and they re-released it with both versions. But if they tried to do that with this movie, it would just be preposterous because there is no way you can get around the fact that they're just shooting at this kid.
And do we know what actual government plans were on the video game? I never.
No, I think that was a complete MacGuffin. You never really knew exactly what it was.
No, it was for a stealth fighter. That's
right. They showed the graphic. It was actually the SR-71
yes,
which we all know was the X-Men's. That was the SR-71.
But if they did make a real video game, it would have been lame because this looked completely. With the video game that they played in the movie was. It looked like it was not interesting at all.
No, but that's what the characters were back in the day.
Yeah. So I hesitate to ask this question.
Just
how many popcorn buckets do you give it?
Value, I give it a 1.5.
1.5 popcorn buckets?
1.5.
I liked it better than I thought I was going to. So I'm going to. It somehow drew me in at some point. So I'm halfway through. I'm going for the end. I'm going to give it 2.
Nice.
2. So you got to think that 1 would be piss poor. That would be like the lowest of the low that you could give it. 2 would be like a meh,
Yeah, meh.
So because of the meh, I would give it 2 as well.
Maybe I'll step mine up to 2. It was entertaining to watch. It is such a throwback. It is such a product of its time.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
You could not make a movie like this today.
And I would just also like to point out that Henry Thomas did not have a change of clothes throughout this movie, even though it went from night to day a couple of times. Same shirt, same pants, same jacket, the whole thing.
Good stuff.
So we've got a great confessional this week.
Confessionals.
Again, inspired by both our headline subject and our classic movie, Cloak and Dagger. The question is, if we or you out there have a favorite pop culture duo. Doesn't necessarily have to have the word "and" in it,
But it's more fun.
It's more fun if it is. And we're saying pop culture. We're saying this could be movies. This could be comics. This could be TV. This could be music. This could be anything. So let's get into it. Who wants to go first?
Let's give Mike first.
I'm gonna go only because I've been listening to their podcast. Is Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne?
Ooh,
wow!
They have a podcast. I thought that they were split.
No, they have a podcast, and on the podcast, you can't understand a word that Ozzy says. So,
so is that half the enjoyment?
Yeah.
What do they talk about?
A lot of what they talk about is the show that they had that was out in the 2000s.
Yeah, that was like
one of the reality show, the Osbournes. Yeah.
So you have the kids on it as well. So you have Jack and you have now I forgot what the girl's name is.
Kelly.
And they just sort of talk about, things that happened in the past. And now Jack and Ozzy have a show on one of,
it's a road tour. Yeah, they go across country and they do all kinds of crazy adventures.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty good. It's filled with foul language and stories of drug abuse at very young ages for the kids and stuff like that.
Wow.
But it's extremely entertaining.
Interesting.
So they are my pop culture couple. And they have staying power. They've stayed together all these years. And I think Ozzy would have been dead long ago if it wasn't for Sharon.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think they actually did split or separated a number of years ago. I remember seeing that somewhere. And so,
I'm sure obviously some tabloid while you were standing in the grocery store.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you get.
But now that we've given
you definitely get a different side of Sharon than the show she's on The View. I mean, you get like the raw Sharon in this podcast, which is really
I'm sure
cool.
she's on her best behavior on The View.
But what's funny is that, now that we've given them a shout out, I wonder if they'll return the favor.
Even if he did shout us out, you wouldn't understand it. What? Ozzy.
So do you want to go, Jeff, or do you want me to go?
I'm going to let Jim go.
Okay. So you might be sorry for that because I have a three-way tie for my. First of all, but I'll be quick. First of all, the first one that comes to my mind, and I cannot rate anybody higher than this, would be the songwriting team of Lennon and McCartney.
Ooh.
The Beatles have given me, and now my son, probably the population of the world, so much joy. They're so lasting. You can listen to any of their songs over and over and over again and hear something new each time. And just the personalities that Lennon and McCartney brought to the Beatles, to their films, to their solo work, you cannot beat them. So that might be an obvious choice for a lot of you out there, but my first choice would be Lennon and McCartney.
Thanks, Jim. Now I seem so shallow when I pick Ozzy and Sharon.
Wait till you hear mine, Michael.
So that was my number one. So number two, going into more like what we love here on TMI, the sci-fi fantasy realm, I would say Mulder and Scully from the X-Files.
Yeah, okay, good.
So yes, I was invested in the X-Files from day one back in 1993 when it was on Friday nights on Fox.
Yep. I
just love the chemistry between David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson as Mulder and Scully. I have every single one of those episodes on DVD. I would love to binge that again, actually. But yes, that's probably one of my favorite shows of all time is the X-Files. So Mulder and Scully.
Even the Robert Patrick years?
Well, actually, yeah, season 8, season 9, kind of, I kind of lost it there. Annabelle Gish, no, not so much. But okay, and so number 3 is my really out there choice. And I've never spoken about this on the show, but when I was a kid in the 80s, I was a huge professional wrestling fan. WWF was my bread and butter back then. Back in the days of Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper.
Oh, wait. Can I guess?
I don't know if you're going to guess. This is pretty obscure.
Oh,
you want to go for
Roddy, Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth?
No.
Oh, Miss Elizabeth.
Oh, Hulkamania's dick.
I love Roddy.
But no. This is in the era of Macho Man. I'll give you that. But my favorite wrestlers, and they were only in the WWF for maybe a year, were the tag team champions at the time, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, the U.S. Express. I was probably...
They don't even ring a bell.
I was probably their biggest fan.
Man.
They famously, at the first WrestleMania, they lost their titles to the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov because Freddie Blassie hit Barry Windham with a cane over his head. But they used to come out.
Are you still bitter about that?
They were called the U.S. Express, and they used to come out to Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen before I think the WWF lost the rights to use the song anyway.
Or the fact that they lost the right to use WWF.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I still mourn that. I still can't think of it as the WWE. But yes, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. And I think Barry Windham's contract ran out at the end of 1985, and then he moved on to the WCW, NWA, whatever you want to call it. So he left the organization. Mike Rotundo stayed on and became IRS a few years later. I don't know if any of you remember him or not. No. But yes, I was back in the day, Windham and Rotundo were my jam, U.S. Express. Boy, so there you go.
I'm going to have to hashtag some wrestling. We're going to get some new followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't.
So you're up, Jeff.
I am up. And I'm going to tell you, this was a Sunday morning staple for years and years. These guys go back to the 1940s. Abbott and Costello.
Oh,
Yes.
Abbott and Costello were absolutely, to this day, if I come across, now probably only the Three Stooges, but of course, because there's three of them, it doesn't count. Abbott and Costello, I absolutely love. These guys started out pre-television, pre-radio and burlesque, stage shows, traveling the country. They did have their own radio show, but they had their own TV show and cartoon as well. But those movies I absolutely loved. And it was just silly, over the top. Anybody who has never seen Abbott, Bud Abbott was always the straight guy, and Lou Costello was the fat little chubby.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for. I was going to ask to see if you could do that. Can you do that again?
I'm a bad boy. And of course, hey, Abbott! Which, if you remember when we reviewed Men in Tights, at the very end of the movie, the Abbott was coming out to perform the ceremony, and someone in the audience does that. Hey, Abbott! He goes, I hate that guy. So Abbott and Costello met the Mummy. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, which actually had Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff.
That's Dracula, yeah.
Their characters.
Can we please do that as a classic movie one of these days?
I'm in.
All right.
Abbott and Costello go to Mars, Invisible Man, Buck Privates, Jack and the Beanstalk they did. So it was just, they always kind of played the same characters, but they just were always in these different situations. And of course, their Who's on First little skit is an absolute classic. So Abbott and Costello, my choice.
Nice.
Well done.
So we can, I think, start wrapping this one up, and we are all very excited for our main subject next week. Jeff, take it away, because I know that it's your classic pick.
Well, I'm so really.
So why don't you reveal what our subject matter is next?
So our main subject, we're all going back to the movies, and we are seeing The Meg, starring Jason Statham. And I just did a little bit of research. This actually wrapped principal photography in 2016.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. It's the same director that made
sitting on the shelf.
I guess there was a point of, if we're gonna make this, I don't want the shark to look fake. But whenever you take any kind of a normal size animal and you make it giant, it's gonna look fake. There's no way whatsoever. I don't really know if it was a budgetary thing or why it's been sitting in limbo. But it's John Turtlebaum, the same guy who directed National Treasure, which I actually enjoy. I'm hoping that they don't take it seriously and it looks like it's going to be a little tongue-in-cheek. I guess we'll find out next week. But it's going to be just a silly, over-the-top popcorn movie. And if I can get my daughter up and awake, she will actually be a part of the show next week.
Yes, great. I've been looking forward to this.
And then as far as classic feature, so it's funny you mentioned The Last Starfighter, because I was this close to actually choosing that. But I wanted to stick with the theme. Last week, Jim went with the theme, Cloak and Dagger. So
is there another movie called The Meg that I don't know about?
No, but it would be funny if someone just took that trailer and replaced the shark with Meg from Family Guy in all the scenes. I think it would be over the top. And I'm sure someone's probably already working on that. But I thought that'd be
that would be pretty funny.
So I chose an underwater theme. Obviously, the go-to would be like Deep Blue Sea or Jaws or I don't know, Deep Six, any of those, The Abyss, any of those kind of underwater. But I chose something a little more lighthearted. 1963, The Incredible Mr. Limpet.
Don
Knotts, one of my all-time favorite movies. That is what we're watching. Lock up your queue, call your library. You may be hard to find it, but yes.
What is the matter with you guys?
I don't think this will be hard to find. I think this is probably in most libraries as a classic.
It is a classic. It is an unsung classic. If anybody doesn't know, it's basically Don Knotts, who is so obsessed with fish that he wishes that he was a fish, and he turns into a fish. And he has fish adventures.
I'm really hoping that we have a lot of Don Knotts double takes, like with his big eyes into the,
right. Even as a cartoon fish, he's still got the big googly eyes and the glasses. So, yes. This is a movie that I can watch ad nauseum whenever it's on. I can recite dialogue from it. So, yes, Mike, you might want to be traveling next week. But that's my choice.
All right. Yeah. All right.
Live and breathe by these choices.
We will watch the Meg and the Incredible Mr. Limpet.
And you can't confuse the two.
No, not at all. Okay. So I think with that, we're at the end of episode 18. So thank you. And remember, please go on iTunes, rate us, and that pop is yours.
It is. It's waiting.
And I got some more from the personal collection that are just busting out. So
I see them.
We have to get rid of this guy first, though. I'm not doing any more until we get rid of this guy.
Get on it, kids.
All right. Adios. Bye.
Ciao.